Hi, this is a video to talk about two ideas with Excel. The first idea is how can we translate customer complaints or problems in the system into what's called a Pareto chart. And the idea with a Pareto chart is that we can identify 80% of our problems, so we know where to focus our energy. So if we had this existing, we have an inventory system and there's a set of errors in it. If we look through the errors, we can see improper part numbers was 250 errors, invalid codes was 90 errors, out-of-date part numbers accounted for 88% or 88 errors. If we look at this, then my gut says, since it's already an ordered list, most of our problems are coming from improper part numbers. But if we wanted to provide a nice graph that we could present to management to show visually where our problems are, then we might use a Pareto chart. So let's look at how we might go about doing this. So in order to understand how big of a problem, for example, the improper part number is, we need to understand, well, what's the total number of errors in the system? So to do that, I'm going to go up here to where it says auto sum. And click on that. And you see it automatically guesses that it's the cells right above it because there's numbers in it. If I wanted to increase this to include other things, I can drag it up or I could drag it around. But in this case, it was correct. So if I do that, it says the total number is 526. And if I wanted to kind of continue this nice formatting, what I could do is I could go on to a cell that I like. I'll click on my format painter and just click on the cell. And now it's changed the font and everything to match. So that looks great. So the next thing is, well, as a percentage, how much is 250 out of 526? So to figure that out, I'm going to use a little formula. I'm going to say, take 250, right, cell B2, and divide it by the total, which is in cell B8. And that tells me that 47.5% of the complaints are the improper part number. Your Excel may or may not already have this formatted, but if it came up as a decimal, you can just go down, I right-clicked here, I'm going down to Format Cells, and under this Number tab, you can click Percentage, or you can click Number, or you can click, if it was a currency, you could click Currency. In this case, we're working with as a percentage, so let's keep it at that. Now, Excel has the ability to take formulas and replicate them throughout the file. Now, if I copy this and paste it down here, what I see is, here, I was working at B2 and B8. Yeah, you can see they're highlighted. And if I go down to here, it's adjusted, instead of looking at B2, it's now looking at B3. And the reason is I pasted it one row down. So it assumes that B2 should now become B3. The problem is my denominator, which was in cell B8, it also assumed that it should go down. So now it's an empty cell. It's focusing on B9. So to prevent that from happening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my cell here, and I'm going to push F4. And you can push F4 or, whoops, or you can manually say B8. And what the dollar signs do is the dollar signs tell Excel, when you copy and paste this, don't change the column and don't change the row. So my numerator is going to change, but my denominator will stay fixed on cell B8. So now if I copy and I paste this into all the other cells, now I can see as a percentage how big of an issue each of these things are. So that improper part number is roughly 48% of my problems. And the invalid codes is about 17% of my problems. So if I want to see cumulatively how big of a deal this is, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, let's start with the 47%. And if I add in this cell, right, so 47.5 plus the contents of C3, which is another 17%, now I'm up to 64, 65% of my issues. And I actually can take this and I'm just going to copy and paste it all the way down. And now I see that 80% of my issues are all because of these three things. So improper part numbers, invalid codes, or an out-of-date part number, which is kind of similar to number 2, right? So most of my issues can be solved if I look at just those 3 things. I don't need to really focus on some of these other things like addresses are incorrect or excuse me, or inactive suppliers. Now, this would be enough for me. As an analyst, I love charts, so it's really easy to see that. But some people are more visual, so you might want to put it into another context for them. You might want to put it into a chart, or sorry, a graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of these cells, go insert, and I want to insert a little bar chart. Now when I insert this, let's make it a little bit bigger here. When I insert this, you know, you can do a lot of different things. You can quickly change the format of them. This one looks quite nice. And you can see it puts the counts here, but you can't see these percentages very well because really, if you look at numbers, this is 250 and this is 0.475. So it's so small it doesn't even show on our graph. So rather than look at the absolute numbers, although that tells a nice story, I can click on these particular bars. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to delete them. I don't want that in my data set anymore. So now I can get, you know, these bar charts that show as a percentage how many of these are problems. And if I want to change this one, I can actually go down here to change series type. And instead of having like that, I can say, oh, let's do that as a line. So then I can see. Let's go back, change our format here. So it's a little, there we go, comes out a little nicer now. I can see in a heartbeat where 80% of my problems come from. And then you could just change the title. You can make this inventory system errors to fix. Right? So if I was presenting this to management, I would say, look, we're going to get the most bang for our buck if we can solve these 3 problems. That's going to get rid of 80% or 81% of all the errors in the system. So that makes it a really compelling story for them. So that's a quick blurb about building Pareto charts. Now, we could also look at doing log files. So in a system, you'll have existing log files. So you can see here I have the date and time that things took place in the system, along with whose the account was, whether or not it was a paying customer, the category, like where the service was being used from, whether it's an information, which is maybe a normal thing, or warning, or whether it was actually an error. So we can go through this and see, you know, interesting information about our system. The problem is I've got several thousand lines of information that I'd have to parse through. And which ones of these are the most important? Well, it's really hard to tell when you have all this data. So what we need is a way to actually filter it really quickly. And Excel's got a great feature for that called a pivot table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the upper corner here. That selects all rows, all columns. I'm going to go to the Insert menu and say Insert a pivot table. Now when it comes up, it doesn't look like much. But I can start to do things. So for example, I can select the category, right? So here's all my categories. I could select the messages, and I'm going to put them into here. So it counts the amount of messages in that category. And then I can also look at a level where I can filter it now. So for example, if I want to only look at error messages in our system, not warnings, just error messages, now I can see, okay, here's the different categories of things that are coming through. So for specific errors, almost all of my errors come from this update page stats command. So if I look at that, 96% or 97% of my my errors, put that as a percentage. So 97% of my errors in this system came from the exact same thing, this